This would make a fantastic open plan apartment. Floating kitchen island over there.
Downward dog.
Nice hardwood floors.
Property obsessed? Read thousands of news and advice articles on Domain.
Hello, I'm Paul Berry. Welcome to Media Watch. And as one of Australia's leading property sites, Domain doesn't just sell houses. It also sells the dream of home improvement, with articles about renovations, furnishing, lifestyle choices, and if you're stranded in Victoria, life under lockdown.
What Melburnians are doing differently in Lockdown 2.0.
That story came with friendly advice from a Melbourne psychologist who told the young reporter,
"It makes total sense to feel sad, to feel out of whack and not motivated. You could really help someone just with a simple phone call."
The psychologist was Sarah Barker, who was quoted 7 times in the article. And last month she was back in Domain with more advice.
Many people don't realise how much their physical and mental health is connected, she says. By all means, eat the food that is going to make you happy, but don't go overboard.
This time Barker was quoted 15 times, with the story also linking to her Melbourne practice, which is great PR if that's what you're after. But in this case, Sarah Barker was not. Because 1 week later came this.
Apology to Sarah Barker. On July 18th and August 23rd, Domain published articles purporting to quote Melbourne-based clinical psychologist Dr. Sarah Barker. Dr. Barker was not interviewed for these articles, and the quotes in these articles were not provided by Dr. Barker.
Yes, you heard right. The quotes in those 2 stories were all made up. But at least Dr. Barker is a real person, because that's more than you can say for some of the people in other stories filed by that reporter, who was sacked from her job 10 days ago. We've chosen not to name her out of concerns for her well-being, and you'll no longer find any of her articles on Domain because they've now all been taken down. But that is only after we alerted them to serious problems with many of her other stories, including fake names and quotes and multiple examples of plagiarism. Take this one from June, for example, about how to choose the right mattress, which quoted a chiropractor called Mick Salvos from Back to Basics. Is he real? We don't think so. He's not listed on the Health Practitioner Register, and the business where he supposedly works, Back to Basics, has not heard of him. As for all of his quotes, they're either made up or ripped off from the company's website. Amazing. Or take this story about house cleaning from March, where many of the quotes attributed to a cleaner called Janet Andrews are from this article from Bauer magazine's Homes to Love, which was published 2 weeks earlier. And in April, there were more lies and deceit in this story, featuring a relationship expert and psychologist called Dr. Peter McNish, who does not show up in the Psychology Board of Australia, which lists all registered psychologists. We've counted at least 11 stories going back to January, which we think are bogus. So, how on earth did she get away with it for so long? Today, Domain editorial director Adrian Lowe apologised to readers, telling the 9 papers,
"We are really disappointed by this. This is not the standard we expect. This was not an isolated incident, and the journalist had in fact misrepresented other people and their professions. For this, we are sorry."
And so they should be. A total absence of fact-checking. And what of the reporter? Well, we've never seen anything quite like it before, and I don't think she'll ever work in journalism again. But now to a COVID lockdown casualty, and how a media outcry sealed the fate of New South Wales Arts Minister Don Harwin. Back in April, Harwin was snapped at his holiday home in Pearl Beach, apparently in breach of the Premier's order to stay home. And Sydney's Daily Telegraph did not miss with the story.
Is Don is bad.
Minister hits holiday home despite Easter travel edict.
Within 36 hours of that front page appearing, Harwin had been driven out of office. And while his own stupidity contributed to his downfall, it's now obvious that media pressure helped ensure his punishment. As Sydney-siders read that first telly-headline over breakfast, New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller was already assuring journalists that Harwin, who was leader of the upper house, was for the high jump.
I will, through my minister, ask for an explanation. If it doesn't stack up, I'll give him a ticket happily. But if his excuse doesn't cut the mustard, he'll get a $1,000 fine.
And an hour after that, 2GB's Ray Hadley was telling listeners that Harwin had been found guilty.
First things first, I can reveal exclusively Don Harwin, the Arts Minister in New South Wales, will be fined $1,000 by the New South Wales Police for basically breaking curfew.
We don't know who tipped Hadley off about the fine, but documents released to State Parliament last month show that New South Wales Police had not even opened an investigation when Hadley broke the news. So Harwin was convicted without the facts being established or his side of the story being heard. Soon after midday, the police investigation did begin and Don Harwin was interviewed, whereupon DCI Stuart Bell, the investigating officer, immediately raised doubts, emailing his superiors around 5 p.m. to say,
"It could be construed that Harwin had a reasonable excuse."
Because Harwin claimed he was moving between two residences and had attended a medical appointment at his place of work. Bell then continued,
"Based on this, a legal advising would a warning or an infringement should be issued."
Which is a garbled way of saying he wanted legal advice. And by 5:32 p.m, Bell's bosses at New South Wales Police had agreed to seek it the following day. However, Commissioner Mick Fuller would not wait, and at 7:04 p.m, his office ordered Harwin be charged regardless, telling the operations manager,
"Can you get Belly to do an event ASAP?"
An event being police speak for charging someone. At 8:13 p.m, confirmation came back that this was in train, and 9 minutes later, 2GB was tweeting out the news.
Breaking. New South Wales Minister Don Harwin has tonight been served a $1,000 penalty infringement notice for breaching COVID-19 regulations.
So too was the telly's state political editor, Anna Caldwell.
Don Harwin has been fined. Story shortly on Daily Telegraph.
No other media had that info. But, more importantly, the $1,000 fine had not yet been issued. And that did not happen until almost 20 minutes later, as you can see from this infringement docket on the police computer, timed at 8:41 p.m. Now, all this would be bad enough, the cops or police minister's office jumping the gun for their media mates. But Harwin then decided to fight the fine in court, and police handed the case to the New South Wales DPP, who took one look and decided to drop the charges. So in July, the fine was cancelled, and Harwin got his job back. So, what do we make of all that? Former State DPP Nicholas Cowdery told Media Watch New South Wales Police should have sought legal advice before charging the minister, and added,
"The only motive for tipping off the compliant media must have been to big note themselves and curry favour. That is becoming all too common and carries the risk of distorting proper process, as happened in this case."
And after reading all the documents, Barrister Steve Boland, who specialises in police malpractice, told Herald readers,
"The most charitable interpretation is that police were in a rush to show that nobody, not even a government minister, was above the law. A less charitable interpretation is that police responded to political and media pressure to prosecute Harwin, who by that stage had become a bête noire of the tabloid press."
So, what did New South Wales Police say in response? We asked 13 questions about how 2GB and the telly knew about the fine before it was even processed. We got no answers. Instead, we were directed to two previous media releases, one about the charging of Harwin back in April, the other from the Police Commissioner in July, after the DPP tossed out the charges, defending his original decision. We also asked the New South Wales Police Minister David Elliott similar questions, and guess what? His office didn't even bother to get back to us. Pathetic, isn't it? And disgraceful. But that's what passes for police accountability in New South Wales. And now, from COVID lockdown to that other Australian disaster, last summer's bushfires, where the official New South Wales inquiry published its findings.
Well, after our bushfire summer that claimed dozens of lives and thousands of homes, the state is backing new approaches to make us safer in future.
Today and every other day, we think about all those who've experienced the trauma, who've experienced the pain and who are still in recovery mode.
One big argument as the fires raged last summer, pushed by Sky and News Corp commentators, was the fires were not unprecedented. The inquiry says they were, and finds the 2019-20 fire season was extreme and extremely unusual, and in forested regions was on a scale that we have not seen in Australia in recorded history. So, score one against the media sceptics. Another claim was the fires had nothing to do with climate change. The inquiry finds climate change clearly played a role, but did not explain everything that happened. Score two against the sceptics. And one of the media claimed that arson was a key problem. Back in January, with the inferno at its height, the Australian told us,
"Firebugs fueling crisis as arson arrest toll hits 183.
That story went around the world, seized on by the Murdoch's London Sun, tweeted in America by Donald Trump Jr., rehashed by Fox News star Sean Hannity on his website, and promoted on Fox News as the real cause of the fires.
So I hate to break it to the Greta Thunbergs of the world, the fact of the matter is this. Australia has an arson problem you can't pin on global warming, climate change, or whatever title you're giving your environmental boogeyman these days.
But it was not just the Australian back home that jumped on arson as a cause. In November, as fire surrounded Sydney, The Telegraph's Tim Blair told readers,
"The evidence is in, and the conclusion is inescapable. Even I must now admit human beings were directly responsible for terrible bushfires in New South Wales and Queensland. We call those human beings arsonists."
And in January, The Spectator also fingered arson, telling readers,
Australia has a firebug crisis. Mankind may be causing climate change, but man is most definitely making fires start.
Meanwhile, on the right of politics, Liberal MPs also joined the chorus, with Craig Kelly telling the ABC,
The majority of these fires, we've had unprecedented numbers of people being arrested and charged with arson offences. Now, the arson is not caused by climate change.
And the LNP's George Christensen posted a video on Facebook, flagged as false information, and commented,
"The cause of the fires is certainly man-made. It's just not man-made climate change. It's man-made arson that, to me, almost borders on terrorism."
So, how true do these confident assertions turn out to be? Well, the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry's 460-page report has a table listing all the significant bushfires in the state last season. So, let's have a look at the 5 biggest and see what started them.
Gospers Mountain.
Lightning.
Duns Road.
Lightning.
Currawan.
Lightning.
Badger Forest Road.
Lightning.
Greenwattle Creek.
Lightning.
The table lists 32 major fires and finds that debris burning started 3, power lines started 2, equipment and a shredded tyre started another 2, 1 was undetermined, and all the rest were caused by lightning strikes. And the numbers started by arson? None. 0, nada. That's not to say there weren't suspected cases of arson in some areas, but the report makes clear these were a very small proportion of the area burnt. So, have any of these media outlets or politicians reported that important news and corrected the record? Not as far as we can see. And should they have known at the time their claims were wrong? Well, yes. In early January, the ABC crunched the numbers and reported
only about 1% of the land burnt in New South Wales this bushfire season can be officially attributed to arson.
And Victoria Police reached a similar conclusion, telling The Age,
there is no intelligence to indicate that the fires in East Gippsland and North East Victoria have been caused by arson or any other suspicious behaviour.
So, have the firebug theorists apologised for getting it wrong? No, they have not. But they should, to ensure their readers and viewers are not misled. And finally, to a new front in the battle to make Google and Facebook pay for the news that floods their platforms.
Facebook declares war on the Australian media and its users. The social media giant threatens to block news sharing to protect its profits.
As we told you last week, the ACCC, the competition regulator, is trying to force Google and Facebook to pay traditional media for the news stories they share. And after leaving Google to fight the move, Facebook has also now struck back.
Blocking the news. Facebook says if the ACCC's draft code becomes law, we will reluctantly stop Australians sharing news on Facebook and Instagram.
It is an extraordinary threat and one the government has condemned. Not only would Facebook block local and international news from its Australian platforms, it would block users from sharing news posts. And given 1/3 of Australians get their news from social media, that could be a big problem. It would also hit smaller digital publishers who rely on Google and Facebook for clicks. As Hal Crawford, formerly of 9MSN, explained,
the impact's going to be devastating, I think, on a lot of, maybe not on 9, maybe not on these, the guys who have big traditional audiences, but on a lot of the smaller digital-only people, it's going to have a devastating effect.
And you only have to listen to the MD of the La Trobe Valley Express to understand why.
I think it's fair to say that both Google and Facebook are ranked 1 and 2 in referral to our website.
There are also serious questions about how Facebook's nuclear option would work. But we can't get answers because Facebook won't do media interviews, leaving the AFR's tech editor to ask,
will community pages across Australia be banned from sharing news articles and news conferences about the spread of COVID-19 or the impending bushfire season?
That's a good question. And he added, somewhat ironically,
Facebook doesn't ban fake news, it only tags it, but it is now saying it is prepared to ban actual news in order to tap out of a legislative process that is not going its way.
So, is Facebook's threat credible, and should it be believed? Former Facebook Australia CEO Stephen Shearer is not convinced.
I do think it's fair that it pays for the content that gets produced and used on its platform, particularly by news agencies and journalists around the world. So this is clearly it's a negotiating tactic by Facebook to an extent to say, hey, here's the bad things that could happen if we don't get what we want in this negotiation.
As we said last week, it's set to be a monumental showdown. And at the moment, it's anybody's guess how it will end. We will keep you posted. And that's all from us tonight. There's more on our website, including our questions to New South Wales Police and their press releases, plus statements from former New South Wales DPP Nicholas Cowdery and from 9 on Domain. And don't forget, Media Bites, every Thursday on your favourite social media platform. But for now, until next week, goodbye.